There we go. Well, welcome everyone to another week of Lethal Sales with Larry Feldman and yours truly,
Yes,
Peter
yes, we
Smith.
quickly catch up, didn't we?
So,
Okay, I'll
I'd
see
like
you in a
to
minute.
thank everyone for joining us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my good friend Larry to discuss tonight's topic first. So, Larry, take it away.
I think our topic tonight is leadership versus management. And I think we all know that it's the people that actually put their arms around you and lead you into battle. It's George Washington, it's Martin Luther King, it's people that lead from the front rather than say, try not to get killed, be careful. So I just think it's anybody that feels that they're in it with the people they're working with or for or at, rather than people that give you directives or are there to criticize or are there to stand in the back.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree with you more. That's what a leader is. But the challenge is why are there leaders and managers in this business and how can they not all be leaders? And every dealer principal out there wants a combination of both. They want the managers because, as my good friend Brian Mote says, managers manage numbers, leaders lead people. And realistically, if you could lead people, you wouldn't have to worry about the numbers because the numbers would come through with just general osmosis. They would materialize.
Yeah, but
And
Peter, isn't it unrealistic to think every manager is going to really be a leader? I mean, it's not a quality that's inherent in everybody. It's got to be something inside of you that is committed, that says where nobody has to tell you to do it. Hey, come on, let's get this done. Let me help you get this done. So I think I'd be more shocked if every manager I met actually was a leader.
right, oh, I agree with you there too. So I got to throw. Looks like Tony's not going to church tonight, so we it looks like we got him for the full hour. Um, in saying that, I'd love to turn this over to my good friend Doug Reeves here, because Doug and I have had many a conversations about this, and Doug kind of knows my views on it. I think that, on, honestly, I would remove half the management staff of a dealership in the ideal operation. So
Wait a minute, Peter. You're not going to wake them up just for that, are you?
no, I'd be a big wrecking ball. I'd turn around and wipe out half the staff because honestly, there's a lot of things that their actual jobs don't need to be done. And Adam Aaron said a couple days ago on a clubhouse call, why do you have a six-figure person doing a $15 an hour job?
Good
We can
point.
remove a lot of their things that is management and turn them into leaders and change the dimension of that. So with that, Doug, let's hear your opinion.
Well, I mean, I think probably everybody in this room can probably identify the difference between a leader and a manager. But I think that the key thing to me is leaders are comfortable and managers aren't. Managers seem to operate out of a position almost of fear, where they have to impose their will, where they have to force people to do things, where they're protective of everything that they know. They're more worried about themselves than the others. Whereas leaders are more than happy to let everybody else do what they need
Hey,
to do to
Damon.
thrive, to help them thrive, to make them
I'm
thrive. They want everybody else's success. And frankly, a leader knows that if he can empower others to do more, he can get things done that he's not getting done now. And I think leaders are comfortable and managers aren't, I think to a large degree. And Larry, I would say, yes, you can develop leaders if you have somebody that they can model themselves after. But if there's no leadership at the top, then yeah, all they're doing is staring at the manager above them and they're going to be a manager just like them. So
Well,
I've
well, think,
opened it up with those thoughts.
but Doug, think how wrong things have gone in the last 50, 60 years in our country, that our leaders have completely gone away from the concept of accountability. I'm talking about the heavy duty ones. Believe it or not, my favorite president, as much as I revere Washington and Lincoln, is Truman. I think he's the last honest president we'll ever have because he didn't want the job. And he's the guy that put on his desk, the buck stops here. Now, he meant that. He would take the blame. He would do things. He would roll his sleeves up. And now you have every idiot in the world saying the buck stops with me, but you don't see people resigning or getting in trouble or anything changing. So
No, you're
while I
right.
agree with you completely, but if you don't have accountability tied in with the sense of trying to move everybody forward, I don't know where the hell you're going.
But again, to your point, those same leaders you described are also protectionist regarding their jobs and their standing, whereas true
True.
leaders don't really give a crap. They're going to do the right thing, and if it costs them their job, that's fine. I did the right thing. And I think there's a big difference there. Just leaders aren't worried. Leaders are empowered, and leaders are looking for better ways to lead. And managers are just worried about protecting what is theirs.
Or maybe Doug, they're more worried about everybody else than they are about themselves.
Well, what everybody else could do to them. Yes. Yeah, maybe that's the best way to look at it.
I wrote down a couple of phrases. Peter, you're muted still, I think, if you were talking.
Yeah, sorry. The book that I just put up there was Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. One of the greatest leadership books out there is about leadership goes right up to the top. The accountability for everything goes to the top. And it's those people that are there to be true servant leaders to their men below, men and women below. So if a SEAL gets injured, it's the admiral that takes the blame for it, for not giving them everything that is necessary for the success of the mission. And Darrell, you're ex-military. You know that very well. And it's not the grunt on the ground that takes the blame. It's the person above them, and it keeps going upwards it's reverse to the term shit rolls downhill. Shit rolls uphill in the military. And that's where extreme ownership comes to play and servant leadership. So give us your thoughts, Darrell.
Yeah, Jeff too. Jeff said he had a couple.
Sorry, my apologies, Jeff.
I have two paradoxes that I write down every time I'm in a discussion about this. And what I wrote down is control versus coaching, and systems versus strategies. I think those two things define either side of the argument. I think managers are just that, man. They're, looking at the cash register drawer, where a leader is looking at where they're going to be next month and then 6 months. That's my take.
Yeah, not only where they're going to be, where each of their subordinates could be, and how can they get them there?
So it was control versus
coaching.
Excellent.
And then systems versus strategies.
Darrell, you're a man of many thoughts and many opinions.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think leaders and managers, based on what I see in today's dynamic, really is, well, we'll just talk the auto industry pertaining the most, is most owners don't want a leader. They say they do, like in theory they do, but leaders also challenge the status quo. They don't settle for mediocrity. And owners want someone that says yes or does what they say. So they want managers. They want people to then march to the dime. You will find the occasional good ones, right? There's always the good and the bad, that they say they allow them to see a vision through. But you need a leader at the top that accepts people challenging what he thinks and what he does, and then gives people the opportunity to fail so that you don't have to micromanage them. So I think it's not only what we see in society of people don't take responsibility. I don't think we spend enough time on training, even if you want to train your people, how to train them. I just had a conversation of A sales manager trains his salespeople because he's now the sales manager. What training did he ever go through to effectively train people? How does he actually lead them? Or is he just washing the same stuff that worked 40 years ago that got washed on him, that got washed on? We're not training leaders. We're training managers because we're allowing the same cycle to happen and no one's actually questioning. And so I worked with a couple groups. I work with one now. Actually, the buying center I'm sitting in at this very moment, he went like this. Hey, man, I want you to build it. And you build it any way you say it needs to be done. And I just need to make sure it doesn't spend over this amount of money. And he says, as long as we're in that, we're good, because he knows he couldn't do it. So he said, I need someone to lead it through and then build the right people. That's hard to find in today's day and age. Most of the time it's, I want someone to do my vision, even if your vision doesn't make sense. That's not a leader. That's someone, like you said, that wants control. There's one group out in the West Coast. They don't do it now, which is very interesting. But they did this all the time, and I was really admirable of it. They would have 2 GMs, 2 GSMs, 2 service directors in every store. And they did this, and they would train people so that when they bought their next store, they could plug them in. And it wasn't about, oh, it was my job or his job. It was, we're preparing everyone for their next promotion. No one had to worry, like, because if you were doing your job, you didn't worry about your job. They had a leadership mentality of, you want to train everyone to do your job, because if you do it right, you're either getting replaced because you didn't do it, or because you did such a good job, you're getting promoted. And I think that's kind of the dynamic that if we want leaders, we have to expect that.
But
in those challenges.
In that challenge, and I agree with that. That's actually something I've yet to hear in 42 years. I think that is a phenomenal opportunity, but that goes against the theory of expense management in a dealership. And it blows it right out of the water. But in all fairness, it's going to be a counteracts because you don't have the turnover cost that is hidden and off the statement that Doug and I have talked about many times, that you're losing millions of dollars in turnover every single year that you don't see because there's no formal way of measuring it.
It's funny. Darrell brought up something that I thought was very salient, that no one trains the managers or the leaders. When we go into a store and we flip a store, one of the trainings we do is leadership training, and it's just for managers. It is amazing how impactful that is, because they've never heard anything like it, because they never get that. So you're exactly right. No one's taking the time to train the leaders.
Well, when you think about like that turnover, right? That's a good point too, right? One, are you training the managers to be better? I had 2 fortunate people when I was in this side of it before becoming a consultant. One's name was Billy Knowlton, great guy, actually dressed like he was a billionaire, which made me just like him altogether, because I was like, this guy is like, he would come into work dressed to the nines. But I'm a closer at that point, and everyone had to be in the statement meeting. Anyone that had a manager title, and he showed them every line in the statement, where it went, what it was, because he was like, my job is to show you how to become a GM. If you're if you don't have any like regard for it, you can say, hey, that's not what I want to do. And you didn't have to come to the meetings. But if you wanted to learn, everyone was there. And then I had another one, a GM that said, listen, and his name was Ray Bischoff. He is widely known as a very interesting and unique individual in the auto industry. And when it came to used cars, he's like, yeah, I know them. He says, but Darrell, I've spent 2 hours with you and you know more about used cars than I've figured out in 20 years. He's like, so this is what I want you to do. You go do it. And if it's not making money, we'll have a problem. If it's making money, I'm never going to come talk to you. But I think it's also that we measure to a statement. I just said this to, actually, I think for those of you guys that were on the Clubhouse call and all things used cars, we always say we've got to build a pay plan backwards to the statement. To me, I literally, every time I hear that, it's like the word idiocy comes to mind, because we build it to a statement because we want to work off a statement that NADA has created that is no longer relevant in today's business model, because it doesn't factor in wholesale operation, doesn't factor in operations for buying centers and acquisition. But then more importantly is, what if, I know this is going to sound crazy if I said this to GMs and owners, you made a little bit less, but you had the best team in the country. Like you had the best team and people were like lining up at your door to work there, but your statement didn't look the way that it's supposed to for a 20 group conversation. But you never had turnover and you had the best of the best coming at your door. You don't even have to put an ad. They're waiting to work for you. What would that look like? And I think
That's
that's the
leadership.
difference in leadership mentality.
That's a little too broad a vision for a lot of these dealers to grasp, Darrell.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
I'd be
Oh.
interested to hear from Tony and Jason specifically, is there an owner that is ever going to say, no, 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 you're not making our top salesman a manager? Would anybody stand up and say that? Or would they say, I want more of what that guy's doing. So if we promote him, hallelujah.
I would say
Yeah, yeah, therefore assuming that because he was good at one skill, it'll translate to another skill. Definitely faulty logic.
it is, and it's been dire the vast majority of the time because they're selfish, self-seeking, self-centered. It's all about them getting as much as they can be. For the most part, put them in a manager position, they fall flat on their face because they don't see the bigger picture. They see what they're doing and how everybody should be doing what they're doing. That's my experience anyway.
why can't you do what I did
Yeah.
with me showing you how I did it?
Well, that's where we're at with leadership versus management too.
And that and you can talk about that to every level because the people who are in dealer principal offices, they were taught by the previous dealer principal, who was taught by the previous guy. And it goes back to your book on your shelf there, Russell, the 1957 Ford manual on how to sell cars. It's never changed. We move in this industry at the speed of a glacier, and I said this at Used Car Palooza. I said, the problem is the meteors hit the Earth and the dinosaurs don't know it yet. We talk about digital retailing. We talk about this. We talk about that. And we talk about change. Oh, we want change. We want to increase our growth. We want. Yet they will not deviate from the current model.
Peter, it's worse than deviating. They resent and they'll get rid of you. You just made a reference to Russell. He's always talking about an old Ford manual. How about the fact that Lee Iacocca was good enough to save Chrysler, but Henry Ford pushed him out of Ford because he tried to push him down after, I mean, look at the developments that guy did and what he was capable of. And I remember when Ford went through a hell of a bad time and they could have really used an Iacocca.
Yeah.
Can I circle back to that question about top salespeople being promoted?
Sure.
So in my 36 years in the business, I've worked with two top performers. By today's standards, maybe they're not, but back in the 90s and in the early 2000s, how many salespeople sold 40 cars a month? All of a sudden, there's lots of them. But these two people, one was one of the top Toyota sales consultants in the country, and the other was a used car sales consultant. And I was the first one I was a student of because he sold cars like you wouldn't believe it, and I couldn't understand how he did it because he was chaotic and stuff was everywhere, but his customers loved him. And so I would get with him and ask, how do you do it? And he would say, I don't know, I just do it. Right? That's the natural, the one that can't teach others. They just naturally do it, and they don't think about what they do, they just do it. And so that particular salesperson, what I would do is when he was with a customer, if he took him in his office or at a table or whatever, I would stay within earshot and listen to what he would say. And he always used the exact same phrases. And he'd get the same response. Usually there was one or two responses. And then he would respond the same way. But when I would take him aside and I say, you always say this, and you always get this result, he looked at me like I had two heads. I don't always say that. I don't always say that. Well, yeah, you do, because I listen to you. And so that was really interesting. He couldn't teach anybody how to sell cars, but he sold a ton of cars. but if you were a fly on the wall, you could learn from him. And then I had another top Toyota salesperson, and they made him a team leader and put 5 salespeople underneath him. And his team was the worst in the showroom of the 3 different teams with 5, 6 people under. And, you know, he came to me one day complaining. He's like, these people don't get it. They don't get it. I can't teach them. He used even more strong words than that because his paycheck was in the tank. And I said, Andy, you are one of the best salespeople I've ever seen. And you can't teach these guys well, they're just a bunch of dummies, he says. And again, he was a natural. He was the kind of guy that just said what he said and made it happen. And they made him a team leader. And about 6 months later, he gave that up, went back to sales, and they tried to talk him back into to be a team leader. And finally, he left the dealership just because they kept trying to push him into leadership. And so my point is, if you have top performers, don't expect them to be trainers or teachers. You could try them on for size, but you need to be a student of them and glean from them what they do, and then you train that information. So today, as I do sales training, much of what I've trained, and Mike Larkin's been exposed to it, unfortunately, but most of what I've trained is not stuff that I came up with. It's what I listened to the top performers and put together, and now I get those results when I train salespeople. But you're never one and done with that stuff. You got to be the Chinese water torture. Excuse the expression. You just got to keep dripping on them until it becomes their authentic swing.
Jason, what do you think?
I think leadership has a lot more to do with a person more so than it does just being a top performer. I think a lot of things in how you're raised, what you grew up around, how your parents treated you, your teachers in school, so to say, and how they bred you into this world and what the world was going to provide back to you. There's a lot of things that we could talk about, generational gaps, differences, and things like that all around, and we can have several debates and discussions in reference to that. But, you know, the top performer of a store is your best salesperson. Being a leader is to be a salesperson. You're selling to a group of people. You have to get them to buy in to a certain way. You have to get them on board and teach them in the manner in which they need to be taught. Every customer that comes into your store is not going to be sold the exact same way. Tom, doctor, cardiologist may have a different set of needs and wants than Mary, the homemaker, and whatnot. You're going to sell those 2 customers 2 different ways. And as a top performer, you should hopefully be able to do that. And I look at it as my team is, yes, they're out there on the front lines, they're selling these different customers, but I also have to sell them on my processes, how I want them to do certain things, why I ask them to do certain things. And I have to do it in a manner of knowing them, knowing who they are, knowing how they act, and knowing the ways that they learn, whether it be auditory, Connecticut, or I'm sorry, not Connecticut, but Connecticut, and teach them in language that they understand. I can't just expect them to jump into my brain. God knows I wouldn't want them to do that. But in order for them to learn, they have to realize why they're doing it in their own way. And my job is to sell them that. If I'm good enough to do that, and I'm good enough to be a top performer in selling cars and selling, 25 cars in the luxury highline business on a monthly basis, hopefully I can do that to a team of 10 to 12 dedicated individuals.
I think the word you were looking for, Jay, was kinesthetic.
Yes.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you're a leader, if you're ever going to try to pull people towards you and pull them forward, is to try to see what motivates each one of them.
Correct.
Because even the analogy you used, I understood it, but I can't completely agree with it, because I've seen people that have come from the most screwed up families in the world, and they're incredible. And we all know people that come from incredible families, and they're the biggest screw ups you ever met in your life. It's almost like the God bless the child that has its own syndrome, where they feel like they haven't really earned something, and there's a natural rebellion streak. But I think if you're not tuned into your people, if you don't want to understand, if it's more like, here's what we're doing, I said so, and that's the way it is. Hey, we got our buddy from Canada, Darren George. Darren, you do a lot of sales training. You're in a lot of stores. What are your thoughts on this? And then let's hear from our boy Russell Hill and Mike Larkin. They're strangely quiet tonight.
Well, yeah, I could do the whole hour by myself, actually. But anyway, there was a couple good topics. Tony, you were pretty sharp there. And Jason, what you just said, and a couple of other people too. You guys are you're on top of it. But my opinion, real quick, let's just go back to the sales managers. If you're a sales manager, you need to be a person that likes to help people. And Larry, I think you've heard me say this before. It's like selling cars. I mean, treat every customer like your grandmother. I mean, why not, right? So if you want to find a good sales manager, I don't know if any of you guys are dealer principals or not, but if you want to find a good sales manager, you almost have to dig back and find out, does this guy like helping people? You can't take a top salesperson and put him into a position, like I think Doug, you said, or somebody said. You can't take that guy into that position. There's absolutely no way you can do it. Because you're right. He is so self-centered, so into himself. That's why he's a top salesperson. And Tony, when you said actually, trying to get script from him, I used to do that in the 90s when I was selling cars. And you want to know what? Those guys really, they do say the same thing repetitively over and over and over and over. And that's why they sell cars. And they have an answer for every question. But anyway, my point about the sales manager, the thing is, if you got it, I'm dealing with managers right now. Tomorrow, I'm at a dealership, and I'm going to have 20 sales managers in the room. My first thing is going to be, do you guys like helping people? And they're probably going to sit and look at me. Oh, what do you mean by helping people? No, I just mean helping people in general. And if they don't get the concept, that's what a good sales manager is. A good sales manager or a coach or a driving range instructor teaching you how to hit golf balls loves to help people. And then if you have a process that you can put with that, you've got an excellent sales manager. But they have to like helping people. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I mean, I think it's a key factor for a good manager. They really do have to like helping their staff.
No, I think, Darren, you got a whole room full of guys here and lady with Rhonda who swear by servant management. Russell, what do you think, my buddy?
Yeah, I'm like Darren. I could talk for a whole hour on this. There's so many different things. I was that way without going into. I was a taker. There's two kinds of people in the world. There's dream makers and dream takers. There's leaders, whatever you want to call them. And my life didn't even start till I was 40 years old. I mean, it was. I wasted so much of it. Wearing masks, playing the game. Admiring other people. And I realized about that time in my life, I hit a crossroads. Something had to change, something significant, because I tried everything and it wasn't happening because of the caliber of person I was. And it took a long time to turn that around. And I believe today there's a key ingredient for a leader, and they got to be a giver. And all of you in this room are, or you wouldn't even be in this room. You'd be objecting left and right. We have different thoughts and ideas and opinions, but I'm going to say, for me, as many people as I've worked with, I quickly find out when I'm talking to people if they're cut out or if they're just cozying up to me because they want something. They don't really want to find out what it takes to go to the next level. I don't have time for those people in my life anymore. I just don't. I give them opportunities, and it's like they're still looking in the rearview mirror. They're talking about what was, and I try to direct them to where they want to go and how I can help them get there, but they can't even identify that. That was a pivoting point for me. Somebody came into my life. It's cliche. Students ready to teach will appear and teach, all that stuff's cliche, but it happened to me. And I met a guy, and he was pretty ruthless in dealing with me, or he wasn't going to spend any time with me at all. And I wanted what he had, and he made damn sure I understood that I didn't have anything that he wanted. So there's nothing to be where I needed to be guarded or, protective of this and that. I had to let it all go. And I understood in that moment. And, it's like the significant problems and challenges that we face today can't be solved at the same level of thinking used to create them. They can't. Something's got to change. And there's only a few things that do that. And then this, you all heard this before. You're going to be the same person you are today in 5 years, except for three things. Okay. To associate with what you read and what you listen to, period, the end. No input, no new input. You get the same old output. We can predict human behavior 30 days from now based upon the last 30 days of what that person did, unless we see them doing something like us being in here, talking, engaging, learning from each other, elevating, lifting each other up. Unfortunately, that's the difference between a manager and a leader. I happen to think you all are leaders, or you wouldn't even be here. You wouldn't be wasting your time. You'd be chasing something else. Okay, I want to get better. And I understand there's a key ingredient for that is I have to help other people win along the way. Oh, I still have my challenges and struggles, but I do know new input over time dictates new output. If not, unfortunately, you are a sum total of everything you've ever seen, heard, and read and done up until this very moment. Tomorrow's not going to be any different unless you do something today. Here we are today in here engaging with each other. That's the difference. I kind of think that everything to me is 95 and 5%. 5% of the people are doing what it takes. The other 95% are followers. Okay. They just are. Bless their hearts. I was one, but something happened and I wanted more. And somebody challenged me, but really what they did, and I realized at 40 years old, I remember what it was like, and maybe you all do too, when you're, in grammar school and then you get into junior high and high school and you're cutting it up with your buddies and you're talking about these dreams and aspirations and you're going to go, where you're going to go to college, you're going to conquer the world, and you're going to be an engineer, you're going to be this, you're going to be that, you're going to be this. And then you start, you get a job, you start trading your time for money and your dreams diminish to the level of your income. But then somewhere or another, if you're watching, if you're listening, somebody comes along and says, you know what? They see something in you. They'll find out really quickly if you're willing to do what it takes. I mean, you got to stretch. You got to be way outside your comfort zone. Somebody mentioned being comfortable will get you nowhere except in a rut. So I'm 40 years old. This guy reaches in, and the older we get, we don't forget those dreams and aspirations and things we want to do and things we want to accomplish. They're in there. But the older we get, the harder it is to get in touch with it. And the more emotional it is, because back then people said, Russell, you can't do that. I tried that. That won't work. Well, now they got interrupted by somebody who just did. And it's not because of education. It's not because of this, not because of that. It's because I input new information. I wanted something more. So he helped me identify my why. And they changed. They started changing real fast. Here's one example of a why. It doesn't have to always be monetary. I wanted a new Cadillac, let's say, okay, and I'm driving a Ford Pinto. This guy's lighting a fire under my ass, and I'm doing everything he's asked me to do, and I'm stepping way out there as uncomfortable as I can possibly get, but I'm doing it. I'm doing it because if he challenges me and I haven't taken any of the suggestions, it's over, and I understand that. He made that perfectly clear. So he said, go to the Cadillac store and drive. And learn as much as you can about, how people are when they get in the car. They don't want to drive because they buy on emotion, right? They got to see, touch, feel, smell, taste, and all that kind of stuff. He said, you get in it. He said, well, I'm really uncomfortable doing that. And most people are, but you keep going back and you keep going back and you keep going back. So you're so comfortable in that car that you become uncomfortable getting back in your Pinto, and you're willing to do what it takes to go to the next level. And that inspired me and motivated me. Unfortunately, not everybody's like that. And that's okay. We need people. We need managers. We need porters. They're critical. They're important. They're equally contribute in a way that make everything work as a whole. And I know I kind of ranted and raved a little bit, but I'm 65 and I'm hungry. I'm reading. I got 5 books on my desk. 4 books on my desk. The most current one is Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Freaking phenomenal. Yeah, there you go, baby. That one too. Your next 5 moves in business strategy. Here's another one. It's called Conversations with God, an uncommon dialogue, a trilogy of 1, 2, and 3 books. And so I'm always stretching and reading. I'm writing. I got stuff on there to remind me that I am worthy instead of I am fat. I don't matter. I don't count. I don't make a difference. That self-talk is so fucking polluting. It's not even funny. And we hear people all the time. I'm even guilty of it from time to time, but I have tools in my toolbox that I've learned over the years where I can snap out of it pretty quick. Maybe I call Peter. Maybe I'll call Tony. Maybe I'll listen to Mike, or maybe I'll call Larry and listen to his latest on how. Okay. How, now, I was,
well said, my buddy. Before we jump to Mike, you know what's interesting? And I mean this from my heart. I think one of the things.
Oh shit! Sorry. I thought she was off tonight and no swear jar.
That's all right.
You got a double.
Damn. You'll get
next week, isn't it?
You'll get billed.
One
of the things that happens as we become adults is we get smarter, but we get stupider, because when our inner child is running wild, when we're kids, everything's possible. You could be an astronaut, you could be one of the Beatles, whatever it is. It's when we get older that we start to restrict ourselves and pull ourselves backwards. And this is going to sound a little weird, but I truly believe this. I think not only to be successful, but to be a successful leader, I think you need to have an inner child running wild, because you have to be overwhelmingly positive. Because when you're a kid, you're crying your eyes out, and 2 seconds later, you're happy again. You're not holding a grudge. You're not walking around for 3 days worrying about nonsense. And the more we can tend to be overwhelmingly optimistic and know something good's going to happen and believe that anything is possible. I think the better shot we have of being happy and accomplishing, what we're going to do. Mike, go ahead, Mike.
If I may say something before Mike does, I feel compelled to say this, because some people talk to me, or look at me in a particular way. And they say, well, you're lucky, you're this, you're that. And so sometimes, depending on the relationship I have, and I don't really care if you guys know or not, it's not going to really make any difference. There needs to be some story where they understand that, I went through a lot of trials and tribulations. So I'm going to share a few of them. I dropped out in the 8th grade, never completed junior high, never went to high school. Okay. I've been in 7 treatment programs, 2 halfway houses, and spent 6.5 years locked up in institutions and prison. And it's like, okay, what's your excuse now? Now, and because I'm an overcomer, because I had people like you in my life that I gravitated to. So I wanted to paint that. People say, oh, you're lucky, you're this. No, I worked my ass off.
Wait a minute. Now, I got to interrupt. The people that say you're lucky need to get hit in the head with a brick.
Well, they're not in here. The people that say that are not in here.
No. But I'm just saying, Russell, I got this my whole life. I was the top salesman at my dealership. I wound up being a partner. And every month I got lucky enough to sell 31 and a half cars a month at a store that sold 150 with 12 other people. Leprechauns with 4-leaf clovers aren't that lucky. You know how you get lucky? You work hard and you put yourself in the path of opportunity. This is not complicated. So you're always going to have people that want to put you down, that want to be difficult. My father said it beautifully. He was a true poet laureate. God bless those that wish me well, and all the rest can go to hell. If you want to help me, help me. If you can't elevate somebody, walk away from them before they drag you down. Let's go to Mike here.
Sure, go to the leprechaun guy now. All right, the Irish guy. Right, pick on the Irish guy. But thank you very much, Russell. You're an inspiration, man. Every time I hear you talk.
No, he didn't finish the story. The reason he was driven to treatment was dealing with me. That's what drove him into this frenzy to begin with. It's very
there is some truth to that. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm driving there myself, Larry, with you in my passenger seat.
Listen, I want it officially stated for the record. But my wife insisted I did get a medical go to get a checkup. I am not mentally insane, but I am a carrier of mental illness. So you should all be very careful when you're in my presence.
Disagree with that 100%.
I'll come to masks again. Okay. But I wrote down something, and I'm in a group where we're reading Think and Grow Rich, and one of the first.
Wait a minute. But I don't mean to interrupt you. But
Yeah, you do.
isn't Napoleon Hill an
Yeah.
exact parallel for what Russell Hill just said? Okay, maybe
Pretty
they're
much.
related because Napoleon Hill went to people that were wildly successful and just basically said they wanted to learn. And people that were incredibly successful took the time to tell them, but instead of letting it bleed out of their ears, they turned it into something that is inspired. Russell, I can't even think how many people Napoleon Hill has inspired. Good, I'm sorry, Mike. It's just I
No,
saw the parallel.
I asked the group a question. I said, "Hey, quick quiz. How many seconds did it take to Napoleon Hill take to accept Andrew Carnegie's offer to interview the richest men in America? How much time?"
Not much.
And I got a whole bunch of different answers. Does anybody in this room know?
It took a while. I
It took
forgot.
a long time.
Yeah.
It's been
It
all,
wasn't quick.
but I put this to memory. It was 29 seconds. And Carnegie said, if it had been another 60 seconds, I would have taken the offer off the table.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So we almost didn't get a chance to read Think and Grow Rich. Thank God that Napoleon Hill grabbed at the opportunity. So kudos to him. This whole discussion, I've been thinking about different sports. I'm a sports nut. And I was thinking, what is the difference between a guy like Ted Williams and Joe Torre? They're both leaders. One was a leader on the field. One was a leader of men. And I hate the Yankees still, but anyway.
Listen.
But
you know, I hate to pick on you, but Torrey was the MVP when he was a Cardinal. So he also led on the field. If you're going to get your stuff right, get it right. Russell Hill's the first. He's putting me up to being hard on you.
See, that's why I have you here, Larry. Michael Jordan, why wasn't he ever a coach? But Phil Jackson wasn't a great player, but he was a phenomenal coach. What's the difference? Wayne Gretzky, he tried coaching, but he was the greatest hockey player ever. But why was he, kind of a failure at coaching? He could skate like the best of them, but he couldn't teach what he knew to the younglings when he got to the point where he was a coach. Now it's like Tom Brady. He's on TV doing the commentary, but how good is he compared to Bill Belichick as a coach? They're different kinds of talents, and the difference between a leadership and management, I think you can see it when you're there. You can see the difference between a leader and a manager, and it only takes a couple of minutes to go into a dealership and decipher, okay, that is a follower, that is a leader. And it's important to decipher those two aspects. But it's not always obvious, right? But there's a solid difference. My thing in politics, I worked on Capitol Hill when I moved to DC as an intern.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, right? The guy that I was working for called us all in the room. Thank you so much for getting me elected. Now the first order of business, is the door closed? Yeah. The first order of business, re-election. I'm like, what? Was that what you were elected for? And he's no longer there. But my thing is term limits. Do your time, get elected, and do your service, teach the next generation of leadership, and get the hell out of office.
Wait a minute, Mike. You just got my brain working again.
Oh my God! Here it comes! Oh my God!
You know what else? You know what else has to be equality? And this is going to sound weird too. Forgive me. A combination of patience and impatience. And the reason I said it is he mentioned Ted Williams. Okay, now I'm an old guy. And for anybody that knows baseball, Ted Williams is one of the 2 or 3 greatest hitters that ever lived. There's the guy was hit 390 when he was close to 40 years old. There was nobody like him. But if you remember, he actually coached the Washington Senators,
Yep.
who were horrible, and made him decent. He was patient. But if you remember, Magic Johnson became a coach of the Lakers. He saw one of his guys on his cell phone and he threw the cell phone out. That was the end of his coaching career. So while he was impatient enough to say, shit, I want you to do it the way I want it, the way I did it, he wasn't patient enough to understand that not everybody learns the same way.
That's right.
Not everybody adapts the same way. So I think to truly be a leader is to be impatient enough to say, Jeff Scherer, I know you can do better, but to give you a little bit of time to develop it. If that makes any sense.
I think the sports.
Now we're picking on Jeff, right?
The sports analogy is great because I was thinking about baseball until Mike folded in basketball, but same thing. You know, those coaches weren't stars. You know, a coach is moving the pieces around the board, right? That's a baseball coach. But the leaders are guys on the team. Those are the guys that the other players look up to.
Do not generalize, because one of the 5 greatest basketball players that ever lived was also an amazing coach named Larry Bird. Because unlike Johnson, where he had the patience, what he did with the Indiana Pacers, they were this close to, to pushing the right buttons here. But if you think about it, he was the unlikeliest of star players. He wasn't even the most athletic guy on his own Celtics team. He just was so sharp in between his ears and so cerebral to his approach that I mean that's very unusual. You guys are all right. You don't usually see a Willie Mays or a Wayne Gretzky be a great coach, because their thing is, man, just do what I did, which is not easy to do if you're not them.
You know, it's interesting, as I've listened to all of this, there was 2 words that stuck out to me of leaders. Darrell mentioned help. Leaders are willing to help. And Russell mentioned give. Leaders give. My father taught me years ago, when you give a gift, you should never expect anything in return.
That's right.
Managers give expecting something in return. Like,
that's right.
What you did for me since I helped you.
Well said, Doug.
Leaders just give. Leaders just help.
The more you give, the more you receive.
Leaders have dirty fingers, right? You know, they're in the trench.
Yep.
Managers are, man, I don't want to get my hands dirty.
Well, like that book, leaders eat last. That's right.
True.
I use an analogy all the time, Doug, of Martin Luther King and George Washington. King never said, there's a lot of racists in Alabama and Chicago, good luck. He led the front every march. And Washington led an army with no ammunition. I mean, you talk about a guy that had to inspire, truly inspire, not just apocryphally.
Yeah.
Again, it's the difference between saying go ahead or saying follow me. You guys are with me.
It's amazing that 95% of the population gets their information from the same 95% of the population that has what they have or less than what they have, and they wonder why the hell they don't have anymore.
It's interesting to me, Larry, and I guess there's another gentleman I forget. Those of you guys that do sales training, do you ever do leadership training?
Yes.
Darren and I both do sales training.
I do.
I know I do.
And that real quick question back to even what Russell said, I want to say earlier, he did say it, but there's an old line saying, you guys have all heard it, the more you give, the more you receive.
Right.
If you want a good manager, you need to be a giver and you need to help people. If you don't want to do that, Wayne Gretzky is not going to be a good coach. Just like Tiger Woods, I don't think he's probably a good golf coach. Right.
Well,
I don't even know. Could Tiger Woods teach you how to golf? I mean, I'm sure he could, but I don't know.
Well, he's teaching his son pretty well, so I'd say.
Oh, that guy, his kid's going to be great. But anyway,
but it does raise a point. Why aren't there leadership trainings? Why isn't that more prevalent? If we've identified.
Because they all have an ego. I'm looking through some. I'm trying to post something here. They all have all the managers right now all have massive egos, and they think they know everything. Even a 25-year-old manager. Oh my God, he thinks he can talk circles around a guy like me that's in his 50s, and I've been writing articles for every auto magazine in the United States and Canada since 2000. And anyway, I don't want to go into my crap, but wow, they really think they know their shit.
Doug, I have a train the trainer program And
Yeah.
the first page of it shows 4 guys in suits getting into a car, and they're saying, yeah, it's only 60 miles. We'll make it. We only have 1 flat tire. Now, nobody in their right mind would do that. But I hear managers complain all the time about their salespeople, but they don't work with them or they don't replace them. They just complain about them.
Well,
That's insane.
That's
I
true,
think
but
it goes
again,
because we
it's
operate
systematic leadership.
we operate under a transactional blanket in this industry. And I'll somebody prove me wrong that more than half the people in the business aren't more transactional thinking than people thinking. And we say it all the time, man, it's all about people.
Yeah.
Those same people will shake their heads, but then they're looking to kick some ass because they didn't make their numbers.
Absolutely.
Here's what I think, like I take away from the coaching analogies and the player analogies. How many of the great coaches that were players, what was their assist recorded at over the history of their playing career?
Well,
think about why is that? Because they were giving the ball away. They were, helping the runs batted in or whatnot. They were helping the team overall, not looking at themselves. The ego's gone.
Jordan and Gretzky are 2.
Yeah, exactly. Gretzky scored a lot of goals from just getting passes.
Yeah. So I would like to say Mike, Jeff, Doug, Darren, Jason, Tony, Rhonda, and Darrell, and particularly Larry and Peter for this tonight. But thank you all for showing up for me tonight. I appreciate it. Unfortunately, I got a hard bounce right now, but man, I appreciate all the feedback and everything I heard. It just keeps me moving in the right direction. So thank you very much. Tony, get better, man. Leave that machine alone. It's going to hurt you. I'll see y'all later.
Thanks, Russell.
Yep. Russell, I loved
Thank you.
your story. You sound
I
like
got
a
a
beautiful
jet
man.
too, so see you guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, Jeff.
See you tomorrow night, Peter.
All right.
In the morning
Sounds
and
good.
afternoon and night, right?
Yeah, tomorrow morning.
Yeah. So getting back to basically the true essence of a leader, and really, how do we get the and we've talked about egos, and we know egos are in check because we drive down the interstate or the boulevard or the main highway and look at dealerships. They're all named after someone on most occasions.
They used to be.
It's often that way, and it's only the OEMs that have stopped that practice. But the challenge is, how do we get through to people to understand that things have to change? That's the question. How do we get to that level?
Peter, that's a huge topic, and I think one of the other guys just said that a minute ago. But management training, all that stuff. Yeah. Larry, it's more difficult to get a manager training session than it is to put 10 people in a sale for salespeople.
Mm-hmm. Correct, because they feel like they don't need it. No, we're good. Just work on my guys. I've been there.
Exactly. And you want to know what? Well, here's the material I'm going to teach today. Do you want to have a look through it first? Oh no, Darren, you're good. You're good. You're good. Go ahead.
Now, having said that,
sure you don't want to add something?
Having said that, so you guys will have some hope. The last 2 stores I've been in, the last 2 managers were in both sessions on both days.
Perfect.
So it's not hopeless. It's just that we tend to skew towards the Peter principle, not Peter Smith, and push people towards their obsolescence. And they're great at something, and we push them to something they're not. But
stop calling it manager training. Stop calling it manager training. Call it leadership training. Let's get rid of the management out of it together. Put the bar hopper.
So I'm going to ask one last thing. Darrell, you said something in a room a while back. You were in a store, and the owner said 3 things, and it was how he looks at things. And you said, if I was to go back into the industry, I'd work for this guy. What were the 3 things?
He said that his people come first, his customers or the experience is second, and his profits are third. And that's how he measures his store. And he was asking about a buying center. I'm actually still talking to him about putting something together, but I asked him more questions because to say that, anyone can say that and be like, yeah, listen, we put our people first and we put our customers second and our profits third. And I'm like, okay, let me see your statement. I want to see how profitable you are. And we'll test that. We'll test that theory. Funny enough, I actually asked him that. He sent me his P&L. And and that's kind of where I was talking about was his comp line was out of control compared to the typical statement. Like it wasn't at the 17% and the 12% and now it wasn't 40% either, but we had another conversation. He says, look, if I need different people or I need the right people and we have to pay up for them, I'll pay up for anybody that's going to put in the effort we need to get to where we're going. He says, but I don't want to pay up for people that want to come here and collect a check and just collect a check. Mm-hmm. So he was also very cognizant about hiring slow, firing fast, of taking the time to find the right people. And then he said his customers, he was also another one. I'm working on an ebook and he did this. And I don't think any dealers would do this. This guy is borderline lunatic. And but I love it, is he said, everyone that comes in contact with customers, everybody in his store, if a customer comes in with a problem, if it's less than $200, there's no manager operations. You just do it. Mm-hmm. Every single team. Now, $200 is a lot, but if you like a receptionist comes in and they say, I was supposed to get floor mats and I didn't get them, you just go get them done. Like there's no conversation.
That's great. That's real leadership. That's empowering your people.
But when you look at the cost effectiveness, of course, I'm going to be the skeptic. So I was like, okay, how much did that cost you? Because people are going to challenge that when you say do that, right? It's easy to say, harder to do. And he says, I'll be honest with you. The first couple of months, he was worried. He was worried he made a mistake because it was way more cost prohibitive. He says, but after 6 months and constantly challenging them and telling them how to go about it and have the conversation and really treating customers right, he's like, we don't have bad reviews. Their CSI is like a 99%.
But Darrell, how do you measure the cost of people that constantly are pissed off and feel ripped off and don't feel like they're happy with the store, where you lose their business and all the attendant business? That's an even harder measurable.
No, and so that's the thing is that, like we were talking about managers. Managers are like, hey, look what I have right here. Like it's in my hand. The leader is saying, where are we going to be at a year from now? Like when I build a buying center, Peter's heard me say this at Used Car Palooza. I've said it on some of my webinars, is when I do contracts, I don't do short-term contracts for 2 reasons. One, if someone says, hey, I want a consultant to build a buying center, if they say we want to do it for a couple of months, find somebody else. I'm not here to practice. Second, is it's their determination to they actually make it work. Are you going to give up after 3 months and then I got to fight you for the next 6 or 8? Like pass. But 2, what are you doing when you do something? If you put a plan in place, a process, whatever you want to call it, is it for today or is it for a year from now? Are you building towards something? And if you put a process in place that solves a problem today, but it doesn't solve where you're going, it's not real because that is a Band-Aid. That's not a solution. And so I think that's the difference too, is that when you say people, customers, and profits, you got to put your money where your mouth is. Now, mind you, this dealership sells 650 used cars, 200 new. They're a used car monster. He could overpay everybody, and this guy nets a lot of money. But when you looked at a statement, if you were at a 20 group, you would tell this guy he was insane and he was overpaying everyone. And a 20 group, he'd be laughed out of a room because he'd be like, how are you at this comp structure? How are you? It doesn't make sense. He's like, guys, I net $2 million a month and my turnover is less than 6%. It pencils heavily.
Can't argue with that.
And so I think that's the thing. Like when I do buying centers, I build teams. I build teams that can then do this job because it's very hard. And it's not about what the dealership wants to do. It's a completely different dynamic. It's like, this is going to be different than anything you've ever seen. And I think that's the challenge of being a leader because I get beat up on the daily. Why are we doing this? It's not working. It's not this. I said, guys, I told you it was going to take 6 months. It's been 3. Like, I know you expect people to say something and to be faster. I actually gave you a timeline of what it's really going to be. Like in 6 months, we will start making money. And when I say making money, you're already making money, but making sizable money.
The real money.
So I think that's the difference of when you look at it is how much are you willing to as a leader also to get shelled every day and have conviction. I think that's the biggest thing of a leader is conviction to your cause or your stance.
And to your
Leader,
vision.
yeah, if you're saying this is my vision, then the moment it goes wrong, you're willing to change it, you're not a leader, you're a follower.
Gerald, what's the PCP again?
What's that? Oh,
What's
people, customers, and profits.
Gotcha.
I don't think we're going to come up with a better point than what Darrell just did. How about if we wrap it up? Peter, do you have anything else, my buddy?
No, just that I thank everyone for joining us tonight. Tomorrow night's going to be a very interesting night. I have the very first official Women in Automotive clubhouse room that is actually sponsored by Women in Automotive by Veronica Dunford. And I will be it's going to be about entrepreneurship, and I'll have Samantha Foster, Brooke Furness, and Kelly Reese as my co-hosts at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. It's going to be a killer night. I can't wait for it. Then on Friday, we have on the APA, we have Marty Hugh. I always get confused on how to pronounce it, but he owns autotrainer.ai, which is a very unique F&I tool for the office, and he's going to be on talking about it on the APA. And then I don't know what David's doing for Friday, but we'll see everyone there as well. So
thank you all so much for joining in on us. It was just a pleasure to see every one of you.
Thanks, guys.
We appreciate
Glad I came in.
Thank you
for the invite, Larry. Talk to you guys.
All right,
Thank you,
we'll
guys.
see you
Good night,
tomorrow.
Take care.
Thanks.